Okay, let's work through a few of these homework problems. Make sure you can kind of get it maybe a little better than we did in class today. First one, here's number 9. Going to graph the parabola. So to do that, I'm going to do, you have 3 ways you can do it. And this one, if it factors pretty easily, I'm going to do the factored form. So I'm going to take out an x and go with the x plus 5, which means one of my x-intercepts is at 0 and one is at -5. So I'm going to take those 2 numbers over here on my graph and put them on my graph. I'm going to put 1 at 0, which is, it's hard to see on my graph right here. Let me darken in my axis. There's my y-axis, and there's my x-axis. All right, so I'm going to put 1 point at 0, which is here, 1 point at -5, right there. And the vertex, remember, is halfway between those two. It opens up, so it's down below. Halfway between those two is -2.5. So if I put -2.5 there, -2.5 there, and just multiply what I have. Sorry about that. Get my calculator. All right, I would get -2.5 times +2.5 after you add it to the 5, and I would get -6.25. So my vertex is going to be -2.5, -6.5, 6.25, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2.5. That's about right here. And because it has an equals, it's going to be a solid parabola. And guys, we've done that before. We've graphed parabolas before. Got to figure out where to shade, so I'm going to pick a point directly above the vertex, so right here. I'm picking that point right, actually -2.5, I kind of missed there. -2.5, make it really big. So I'm going to plug in -2.5, which I've already done. And when I plugged in -2.5, this is what I got. All right, y is 0 because the point is on the x-axis. So it's 0, is 0 less than a negative number? No, it's not. So I'm not going to shade inside the parabola. I'm going to shade outside the parabola. All there is to it. Hopefully that makes some sense. The next one. Okay, number 13. Do a tad bit different way. I'm going to go another way that we graph parabolas is we found the vertex. We did -b over 2a. So I went ahead and did some of this work to make it go a little quicker here, but found did -b over 2a. Remember, that's b, that's your a. Worked it out, got -5/4. That's my x coordinate of the vertex. Plugged it in for the x's down here on this line. Plugged it in for the x's, and I got -1. I plugged it in my calculator. I got -81/8. So my vertex looks kind of weird, but it's -5/4 and -81/8. As a decimal, if you want to know what those are, that's like -1.25, and that's like -10.125. So that's my vertex. So I'm going to go over here on my graph. There's my x-axis. There's my y-axis. Actually doesn't fit, so -1.25 is somewhere down here, -10.125. Now, one thing we didn't get to in class today is when I'm doing this kind of form, instead of trying to figure out where my x-intercepts are, I'm going to use the y-intercept. Like I know the y-intercept is -7, so I'm going to put a point in -7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right there. And because it's symmetric, I know there's another point, about right there somewhere. So now I can connect and draw my parabola up like this. And this is the one case, I told you today the best point to use is always directly above, and it usually is. And so you can use it here if you want to, but because it's in standard form and because I didn't factor it, what I'm going to do instead is I am actually going to use 0, 0 and see what happens. So I'm going to plug in 0, 0. I'm going to put a 0 for my y right there. And if I put a 0 in for my x's, what happens is those two just become 0 and I get a -7. So really it says 0 is greater than -7. And you got to ask yourself, is that true? Yes, that is true. So you would shade inside the parabola because that point did work. All right, so that's a tad bit different than what we saw today, but that's okay. We're still good. All right, 14. And doing this one the same way. I went ahead and worked out the -b over 2a right here. I got 9/4 when I did that, -b over 2 times a. I plugged it in 9/4, and I got this vertex right here, 9/4 and 49/8. Now, if you want a decimal for that to make it easier for you to graph, 9/4 is 2.25. 49/8 is 6.125. So that's where I'm going. I'm going to 2.25. Let me find my axis again. 2.25 and 6.125. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're about right there. I'm estimating right there. There's my vertex. I know it's going to go down because I had a negative sign in the front. Also, my y-intercept is right here. My y-intercept is -4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, way down there. And I know it's symmetric, so I'm going to have another point, somewhere around there. So I'm going to connect those and draw my parabola. Didn't get that exactly symmetric right there, which is okay. One thing I know though is 0, 0 is not inside there. So I'm going to use 0, 0 again because, again, you can use the point here, but when it's in standard form, to be honest, it is easier to use 0, 0 out here. So if I put 0 in, watch what happens. If I put in for y, this side just becomes 0. Over here, I get 0 and 0 and -4. So it really says 0 is bigger than -4. That's true. So 0, 0 did work, and it's not inside the parabola. So I'm going to shade outside the parabola, both sides, outside, just like that. Watch that again if you need to. All right, let's do this. After talking to another math teacher, I'm going to go ahead and just eliminate 37 and 38 from your homework. I hope that's okay with you and you don't feel deprived. And there's a reason why, which I'll tell you about when we start a review on Friday. So let's don't worry about 37, 38. I'll skip 38 also. Skipping 38 also. Let's go to 46, and we will do these. This just says solve algebraically. And this is what you do need to know how to do, is solve algebraically, which means we're going to factor this. So what I'm going to do to factor is I'm moving the 25 over. Anytime you're going to factor an inequality or equation, you need to get the one side set equal to 0, which we did. This is a difference of squares. So when you factor, you should know how to factor that. 2x plus 5 and 2x minus 5, just a difference of squares. And that's all the math work as far as factoring and stuff you're going to have to do. But you do need to find your zeros or your x-intercepts, which is what makes the parentheses 0. In this first one, it's -5 halves. In the second one, it's +5 halves, or 2.5. So on these problems, like I showed you in class, I want you to make a little number line down here and put the two values on it, -5 halves and +5 halves. And then we're going to pick a point. The best point to pick is 0. It's right in between those two. So I'm going to put 0 back in here and see if it's true or not, or see if it's positive. So I'm looking at this line. Let me change colors here so you can tell exactly where I'm at. I'm picking this line right here, and I'm going to plug 0 in for the x. If I plug 0 in there, I get 4 times 0 minus 25, which is negative. So that tells me everything in between -5 halves and +5 halves is negative. Now I'm going to pick something bigger than 5 halves. I don't know, something like 10. So I'm going to plug 10 in up here. If I plug 10 squared is 100. 100 times 4 is 400 minus 25. That's big. That's positive. So everything past here is positive. And the same thing is true if I plug in something negative, because I'm going to square it, which makes it positive. So I get plus minus plus. All right, so because this symbol says less than 0, I'm looking for my number line down here. Where is it less than 0? What's less than 0? Or it's negative between the two. So my answer is going to be x is greater than -5 halves and less than +5 halves. It's between -5 halves and +5 halves. And I didn't put an equals because there was no equals up here. And I'm going to be honest with you, and I've said this on the video last night, I kind of whispered it. When you do your graph down here, your number line, the signs are always going to alternate. They're always going to alternate. So once you just find one of them, you found them all. Let me show you another one. Same thing here. First step, let's move the 28 over. So I have x squared minus 11x plus 28. All right, I need to factor that. So I need factors of 28 that give me -11. That's going to be x minus 7, x minus 4. You've got to be able to do the factoring. Now, figure out what your zeros are. What makes it 0? +7 and +4 do. So when I make my number line here, I'm going to put a +4 and a +7. And I got to just figure out where it's positive, where it's negative. So I'm going to plug numbers in. That's all I'm doing. So let's plug zeros over here. Let's plug a 0 in up here. So it'd give me a 0 there, a 0 there. So obviously that side would just be 28. 28 is positive, so I'll put a plus sign. Now I told you the signs alternate every time, which means that's minus and that's plus. Now this one's a tad bit different because look what kind of answer I need. I need to know where it's greater than or equal to 0. Where are my plus signs? Well, one of my plus signs is over here. It is less than or equal to the 4. My other one is past the 7. It's over here. So I put x is greater than or equal to 7. And notice I put or. I did or because of the way the graph went. You put and, or you write them together when you shade in between. You do or when you shade away from each other. We did that earlier this year also. This whole lesson is just filled with so much review stuff, combining it with new. It's quite a bit. I'll admit that. It's quite a bit, but you got it. You can do it. Let's keep going. Let's try this one, same stuff. So I'm going to move the 10 over. 3x squared minus 13x minus 10. And I'm doing that so I can factor. To factor this one, I'm going slide, divide, slide. So I'm sliding the 3 over to the 10, makes that 30. Factor what you got. I need factors of 30 that give me 13. And at first I'm thinking 10 and 3, but it's a negative 30. So I've got to use minus 15 and plus 2. Be careful there. Now once you factor, you slid. Now you got to divide. So I'm going to divide by the 3, divide that by 3, divide by that 3. Now, 15 divided by 3 is 5, which is neat. This one, 2/3 will not divide, so you slide the 3 again in front of the x, and you get that right there. Now, you got your two zeros. One is 5, one is negative 2/3. So you plot that. I'm going to go negative 2/3 there, 5 there. I'm going to plug in a 0 like I always do, and I'm going to plug it in back up here. If I put a 0 there and a 0 there, all that leaves me with is negative 30, which is negative. So my negative is going to be negative in between. That's where the 0 was, which means there's plus out there and plus out there because they always alternate. So my answer is where, look what I'm looking for. Where is it greater than 0? Where is it greater than 0? It is greater than 0 out here and out there, which is an OR. So I'm going to say x is less than negative 2/3. Is the greater, is where the plus sign is, and also greater than 5. And there you have it. Let's try a couple more. All right, this one is already ready for you to factor, so I'm going to go ahead and slide, divide, slide. Slide the 2, make it 6. I need two factors of 6 that give me 5, but be careful because it's negative 6, so I'm going to choose negative 6 and positive 1. Go back and divide, divide by 2, divide by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. X plus 1/2, slide the 2 again. So my two zeros are 3 and negative 1/2. That's what's going on my line down here. So I have negative 1/2 and I have 3. All right, so same deal. 0 is right here. So I'm going to plug in the 0 back up here. If I do that, all it leaves me with is negative 6. And negative 6 is negative, so that's negative in there. It's plus in there. It's plus out there. I hope you're starting to see a pattern here. Now, this was less than. I'm looking for less than. It's in between here. So I'm going to put negative 1/2 is less than equal to x, less than equal to 3, because that's where I shaded. That's where the negative sign is. And I'll put it equal to there, less than equal to, because that's what was in the problem. All right, one more. Last one here. Slide the 4, x squared plus 8x, slide the 4, you get 84, which is huge. All right, so I need factors of 84 that give me 8. Factors of 84 that give me 8. Excuse me. 84 is 12 times something, 4 times something. And, of course, it's also 14 times 6. So I'm going to go x plus 14. X minus 6, that gives me the 8. Now, don't forget to divide by the 4. So I'm dividing by 4, dividing by 4. Now this time neither one of these divides, but you can slide. First of all, 14/4 is really 7/2. Sorry, when you reduce it. So I'm going to slide the 2 in front of the x. The second one, 6/4 is really 3/2 when you reduce it. So I'm going to slide the 2 in front of the x, make it minus 3. There's your factored form. Your zeros are negative 7/2 and positive 3/2. Put those on your line. So negative 7/2 is here, 3/2 is there. And you know what I'm going to do? That means 0 is right there. And 0 is what I'm going to plug in here. So I'm going to put a 0, a 0. That leaves negative 84, which is negative. That's negative. That's plus. That's plus. What am I looking for? I'm looking for the positive because I got a greater than sign, which is here and here. So to write that, where's the shading? X is less than or equal to negative 7/2, or, don't forget your or, x is greater than or equal to 3/2. Hoping it's starting to make some sense. Try them again if you need to. Go back and watch, but I'd try them until you could get them. It's a skill, and the best way to learn a skill, practice a skill. So hope that helps you. I'll see you tomorrow. Watch your other video. Don't forget to watch your other video, your real video for tomorrow, which is the last video in chapter 4. We will review on Friday and Monday for our test, which is coming on Tuesday. So see you tomorrow.